Hi, Ruth. So lovely to have you with us this evening. Thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing your experience in working in the space of domestic violence and various other aspects and issues. So, before we proceed, I just wanted to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of your experience, which I know is plenty, and share a little bit about your work.
Thank you, Anusha. So my name is Ruth. I'm an advocate. I practice in Bangalore in Karnataka. And I have a law firm called SRT Law Associates. We focus on multi-law practice, but we have a special focus for, vulnerable groups, women and children. And so we do all kinds of work that includes protecting children from sexual offenses, domestic violence. We have few cases helping children from human trafficking and many other cases. Apart from that, before this, I was working with an organization named International Justice Mission, and I was the lead in the policy and judicial relations, wherein we helped in developing SOPs, we helped in developing guidelines and also orders for the government on the issue of human trafficking. I've worked both on the bonded labor project as well as the sex trafficking project. And in both these projects, I've worked as an advocate. So I was also involved in the rescue of children, of women and families who were bonded either for labor exploitation or they were bonded for commercial sexual exploitation. And I've also taken up their cases. Worked with them during their rehabilitation as well as helped them in trials. I've received a couple of convictions against the perpetrators. And also I worked on the policy side in both cases, that is both in bonded labor projects as well as in, commercial sexual exploitation.
Thank you so much for sharing your vast experience. I myself have worked with you in a very small way, obviously not in the space of legal work, but I've seen what an excellent advocate and excellent lawyer you are. And we're so honored to have you with us just to share your experience and help us understand, and for all our viewers who are watching, what domestic violence in Indian context is, what is the relief that they have, what does the process look like for them. So if you're ready, I'll go ahead and start asking you some questions, if that's all right.
Sure, Anusha. Thank you.
Great. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask is, legally, how would you define the term domestic violence in India? What would qualify as domestic violence?
Yeah, so we have a Domestic Violence Act. And so basically, it mainly talks about the protection of women from, any kind of domestic violence. And the definition is laid out under the act itself. So the first requirement is the person should be in a domestic relationship. That means it could be that the person is in a living relationship or the person is married. Both of them are regarded as a domestic relationship. And anything that affects the woman, both mentally, physically, sexually, from their respondent or from their husband or from the person who they are partners with, if that person is involved in creating any kind of physical violence or sexual violence or mental violence or even economic abuse, which means the assets are being taken up, all of that would come under domestic violence. Domestic violence is a very it's got a vast definition, and it's very vivid, and also it's got clear definition, so that anything to do with anything to do in affecting the mental well-being, or even if it causes threat to the life and limb of the woman, then that all of that would come under domestic violence. So I can just give you certain examples. If you go on to saying what is physical violence is all that we see, like it can be slaps, or just any kind of physical abuse would come under physical violence. And again, sexual violence is more to do with any kind of sexual violence, not just rape. It can also be any other kind of assault with a sexual nature, then that would come as sexual violence. It's got more expanded definition comparatively to the other laws. And then when it comes to mental violence, it can be anything. It can be even an oral abuse, or it could be telling that you are not able to bear a male child, or you are not able to give a child. All of that is regarded as a threat, and that can come under mental violence. And then finally, economic abuse, which means any asset that the both the persons jointly have, or if the wife has some property from that was given to her during the marriage. Some of them call it as then, and some of them call it as gift. But whatever property that was given to the wife, if or the partner, if that is taken away by the husband or the other partner, then definitely that would also be related as domestic violence, and it would come under economic abuse.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ruth. One of the follow-up questions I just wanted to ask off of this is, a lot of times I think women don't fully understand the mental violence aspect of it, or psychological abuse. And largely in an Indian context, it's not categorized as domestic violence as such. How does the
Yeah.
court, or how do the police, or how do you as advocates handle something like that?
Yes, so right now we have many cases like this, they brush it off saying that it was just a spur of the moment and he really didn't intend it. But the reason why domestic violence came in is because all of these issues created more and more harm to the women. And most of the time there was no other act that could actually vividly talk about the abuse women face in their homes. And that is when the parliamentarians and many activists realized that this is an important act that needs redressal, and this is an important offense that need a lot redressal. And that's why domestic violence have come in. Now when it comes to mental abuse, one thing that I always hear is even women who are part of the whole situation and who are victims find it very hard to accept that this is wrong and this should not be against them. And so what is most important in these cases is we need to find good counselors who can counsel them and help them come out of the situation. Because most of the time what we see is societies also play a huge role in letting them figure it out, and let them blame it on themselves. So most women would think, oh, maybe I did something wrong and it's just a spur of a moment, let me give one more chance, and let me give one more chance, and then it moves to physical abuse and sexual abuse and henceforth. So we need more awareness around this subject. We need more information given to everyone, and this should also start when women are in college, and even outside they should know that they cannot be mentally disturbed as well. And so in many of our cases, the first thing we do is we ask them to stand up and fight the case. You should be able to fight your case and figure out that there is something done, and the thing that's done is wrong. This is something that the women themselves should feel, or the survivors should feel. And sometimes it's not easy. As lawyers, we can only talk about law and we can help them in fighting their case in the courts, but there is a difficult battle for them to fight within themselves, and that rehabilitation needs to be done through counselors. And even under the Domestic Violence Act, we have a provision where the magistrate themselves can appoint counselors, and appoint special welfare officers or even protection officers to just look into this matter, provide support to the woman who's suffering from domestic violence. So there are a lot of players involved, and they need to implement this act well. Then only we can see more and more of these cases getting reduced, and actually the people who are committing such crimes, they are held accountable for these crimes as well.
Right. Thank you so much, Ruth. I think that really helps, especially for someone looking to understand domestic violence, or like questioning and saying, would this count as violence? It's really helpful when you spell it out like that, and they understand that psychological abuse is also a category for domestic violence. The next question I wanted to ask you is, in situations like this, what should a domestic violence victim do? Where should they be going for help if they want help? What would that look like?
So there are different provisions available. The first thing that you can do is, file a complaint at the police station. And sometimes it's very hard for, many of the individuals to come forward and, talk at the police station. Maybe they have had some, bad experience as well. And so there are other options as well. There's also options where you can go to lawyers. Lawyers can file cases for you right before the magistrate. So it's not essential that you need to go to the police station. You can also directly file your cases before the magistrate, and lawyers are well versed in, filing petitions before the magistrate. Apart from that, there are protection officers. According to the act, there are protection officers that's provided under the law, and you can, most of the time women and child department itself will appoint protection officers. You can, move to these protection officers, meet them, tell them about your issues, and then they can write down a complaint and they will forward it to the magistrate. And then apart from all of this, we have general committees as well. We also have, like, the State Women's Commission. You can raise your issues at the State Women's Commission. They are open. You can use the anonymous toll-free number 181, wherein you can get immediate redressal. At least once you've made that call, immediately there'll be someone to take up that call and listen to your issues and give you an immediate solution. So there are different ways possible. Try and figure out which is the easiest way forward. And there are many NGOs as well who are working around this area. Now, if you're finding it hard to figure out which is the NGO, talk to any of the lawyers. Most of the lawyers would be able to even directly file these cases. So that's the easiest way, because every family would have one or two lawyers who are working, and so it'll be easy for you to also to talk to any of the lawyers, and they would have connects. But if you are strong enough, and if you have, if you think that you can handle it, the best thing is to go to the police station and file the complaint. The police also can then forward the matter to the magistrate.
That's very useful, I think, just to walk us through those steps and know that these are the places that they can go to immediately. One of the things I did want to ask is if there is fear and intimidation or all of these other aspects, is there a chance for them still to go to the police and file a complaint without having backlash from their abuser?
So most of the time, if you think there is a threat to your life, I would always suggest to, talk to a lawyer or an NGO person or a person who can handle your situation as well. Because if at all you've gone to the police station, there are high chances that there can be backlash, right? And then to get back to your, household, especially to your marital home, will be hard. So the best thing you can do is, find a counselor or find an NGO person who works in this area, or find a lawyer, talk to the police station. The police itself, in most of the police station nowadays, they keep a list of all the shelter homes available. So you can also get a shelter home. Or later on, if you're not comfortable with that, you can make your own decisions. But there are shelter homes provided in and the list is provided in the police station itself. Or the NGO person also can help you. But I would always say go with someone who has a good idea about how to go about the case. And if you're moved out of the marital home, then the backlash that you can expect will be lesser. And then the only thing you need to do is file the petition at the at the magistrate court, and then you can expect a lesser backlash. But if you're going back to the same household, I would say always take someone who has good idea about what to do next.
That's very, very helpful. So while we're discussing all of this, I did want to ask, like, what are the rights of a domestic violence victim? What are their rights, and what can they demand or not demand in the context of having been subject to violence?
Yeah. So the laws have become more and more protective for, victims of domestic violence, and survivors get the right to counseling. So if you need counselors, every magistrate court should provide the counselors based on situations. In most cases, many of the victims do not seek for counselors. They are saying they are okay of their own. And so in those cases, you can also decide how you want to go about it. But you have the right to take counseling. You have the right to have your own lawyer. And at the same time, if you can't afford a lawyer, now in many cases, I also know that many of the people coming from vulnerable groups, they cannot afford a lawyer. We have something called the Legal Services Authority, where you can get a lawyer free of cost, which means the state will, take the services of providing the cost and other things to that lawyer, and the state is engaging that lawyer, so you can get the lawyer free of cost. So that's provided. And then you have the right to make different applications. You have the right to get protection. You have the right to ask for a shared household. You have the right to ask for separate residence. So based on each of your circumstances, you can ask. If you think you have gone through more trauma and you need compensation and nothing else, then you can ask for compensation. And also, if you need a welfare expert to listen to both the stories, now if you are more comfortable with that, even that is allowed. So you can have a welfare expert listen to both the sides and then come to a conclusion. So depending on facts and circumstance of each of the cases, you can file your own petitions. In most cases, what we see is the first thing that most of the victims who have gone through a violent domestic violence would ask for shelter homes, would ask for protection, so that they are protected completely. Most of the time it's more of physical violence, or they've reached that stage, and only then the survivors want to come out, and they feel like, okay, now if they stay back again, then their life is at threat. Only then they come out and try filing petitions. So in such cases, the first thing that you can ask is shelter homes, and also for protection from any kind of threat or any kind of attempt to create any kind of violence against the victim. And then apart from this, they also have the right to file under the section 498A, which is also known as dowry harassment. So if there's dowry harassment again coming from the husband, you can file separate petitions under the same Domestic Violence Act.
Thank you. That is so helpful. So when we were discussing the previous question, one of the follow-up questions I was thinking of is what would you do if you didn't have the money to afford a lawyer, which you said right now that they can access the Legal Services Authority and the state will provide a lawyer. Would you say the route to that is fairly straightforward, or it can be quite challenging for a victim?
Most of the time, I feel like victims or survivors do not know about this provision. They do not know where to approach. And most of the time, the protection officer who's supposed to tell of the services, they also don't tell. So that's when the issue is. So as much as, the act has a great vision, the implementation is kind of poor. So we have a Legal Services Authority, we have lawyers there, but most of the time what happens is that it doesn't reach to that stage, because either the victim has no idea that there is a provision like this, or the protection officer has not taken the steps to ensure that that survivor gets a lawyer. So these are some of the practical challenges. And then another thing is, many of the lawyers who are under the Legal Services Authority, they would not be that passionate. They are also like just lawyers who wants to get some case or the other. So some of them are very much passionate, but there are also cases where lawyers will not be that passionate. And that's when, the case can go for a toss. But that happens also if you engage a lawyer. So it's important to find the lawyers who are passionate about the cause, and that they would not, meddle with the case, because at the end of the day, justice is important for both sides. Both here, in a way, we have to ensure that hearing is done on both sides, but at the same time, justice is not meddled with. So the best thing that we can do in such situations is, if at all there's a tampering of evidence, or if you feel like there's something going wrong, then definitely in such cases you can approach back the Legal Services Authority and tell them that you need a change of lawyer. And that is also provided.
Great. That's so useful to know, because as you said, I think the knowledge gap is far bigger than we understand, in the sense that nobody knows that the state provides such services, and if they do, sometimes they're under equipped or under staffed, as well as underqualified in some ways because of not being passionate. So just following through that, the legal procedure for addressing domestic violence, what does that look like? If you can walk us through step by step, right from, say, the choosing to file an FIR, or the choosing to approach a NGO or a lawyer, what would the course of the legal process look like for domestic violence victim?
Yeah, in the domestic violence in cases, it's slightly different from criminal matters, uh, because they want to club in a little bit of the family court laws, and at the same time ensure that the victim who suffered the loss gets protection, and also gets compensation. And so it's a mix when what we see in courts. So once you filed a direct petition at the magistrate courts, the first thing that we see is to hear both sides. So most of the time the petitioner will be able to give their petition and give their arguments. In the same way, the defense side, that is the respondent side, or we call the husband side, can give their petitions and their arguments. And it takes a good amount of time, because there can be different applications filed, as I've already stated. In many cases there can be a clubbing of a lot of offenses that have took place. So in so we'll the relief sought would be also so many, or the petitions that we have sought will be many. Like in one of my cases, we realized that the victim required shared protection. Then after that the victim needed compensation, and then we also realized that the victim needed maintenance. So we have been then we filed separate petitions for all of this, and later on we realized that the husband was also trying to take away her children, and so then we filed a custody petition also. So it will depend on cases. So the courts will ensure that they hear both sides, so it takes quite quite a bit of time. And then evidence is also taken from both sides. Cross examination is also done. And then if it's just an interim application, the court will provide interim orders very fast. So it's like if you need maintenance or if you need protection, these are things that you need like really fast, or you need it quite early so that you are protected and there's no threats happening to you, and the risk is high there, right? So in such cases, what the courts also see the urgency of such matters and ensures that those interim applications are heard and orders are made out. But when it comes to the overall judgment, it takes time. Evidence is collected from both sides and then a decision is made. So that takes more time than the interim application. So when it comes to maintenance or protection or sudden requirement of a shelter, all of that is immediately given. But the other aspects like compensation and a complete alimony or maintenance, or even to figure out whether you have to decide where to figure out on economic abuse, things like that, the court takes more time to decide and then come to a conclusion.
Thank you. That is really, really helpful to know that is the legal procedure, and it varies from person to person, almost based on their abuse and based on the needs that they have.
Yeah.
So in case someone's already registered a case, how long would you say the process would take? I know, again, it might vary from type of abuse to type of abuse and based on the various petitions that are filed, but just on an average, are they very long drawn court processes or fairly short? What would you say?
Anusha, you would know the cases in India and how it works, because you are also working with us in many of the projects. Like many of us who are working in this court system as well as in the public justice system know that in India, it takes quite a while, and it also depends on judges. We have very proactive judges who completes the case in a year, but we also have cases that will go for more than 5 and 6 years. Again, it also depends on the proactivity of the judge, the how the lawyers are, how ethical the lawyers are, and then also depends on the parties as well. Sometimes both the parties are not ready for any kind of settlement. In some cases, even if the party is ready, the other side wants to object and may put in a lot of applications. So we can't give a proper time, but I would say in an average it gets over in like about 3 years, but that's my experience. I cannot give data evidence to this, but in our cases I think it takes about 3 years to complete it. domestic violence case.
Absolutely. I completely understand what you're saying, and I know how drawn out our court processes are and how much bureaucracy is there and corruption
And
is there.
and with the COVID situation right now,
Yeah.
it's been like there, especially when there was this huge second wave that got hit, and with the new third wave that got hit, the courts are kind of not well equipped to handle this whole wave as such, because we are not technologically advanced as well. So especially the smaller courts, that's the domestic violence courts, are being taken care of by magistrates, which means they are not technologically advanced, and we don't have that many online hearings happening in these courts, which means
Right.
that again we have backlog of cases, and these cases then gets carried forward. We have a new set of cases being filed. So based on my experience, I would say that last 2 years it was very difficult to see a progression in many of our cases. Most of our cases came to a standstill. We just got hearings, dates, and that's it. Nothing much was happening. But then I'm hoping, like, we have learned from this, because many of the courts now are moving on to a hybrid system of also accepting online modes, especially high courts in India. All the high courts are very well equipped to do online hearings nowadays, and many of the sessions court as well. We are yet to see it in magistrates court. Hopefully things will get better, and this is a good learning that we need to also advance ourselves technologically.
Absolutely, absolutely. But even though all of these challenges are there, would you personally encourage a domestic violence victim to go through a legal process, even though it can be long and it can have its challenges? Would you recommend that that is still the route they should choose to take rather than not take it and go through more um, not as a structured process? What would you
So
say?
So I would say the first thing a survivor should do is to move out from that victim state. And that's the first step you can do. Don't get back to the violence that you're facing. And that is the biggest step you can do right now. Once you are able to say stop and get away from that kind of violence happening over you, I think the rest then will fall in place. Most of the time, what we see is, even though, you filed a case, many of our, victims or survivors, they don't want to proceed the case further, because they want to get back again, or there's some kind of settlements, and that's when things gets more complicated. So the first thing you have to do is say no to this kind of violence, and to think about it. Obviously, yes, court system can be very tiring, and so that's why I keep encouraging all our survivors to utilize the counseling and NGO support system who they are part of, because they can really help. And definitely there are different ways of filing cases. That's why lawyers are there. They help you all throughout. It's not necessary that you need to take care of these cases. The lawyers are the ones who are fighting your battle. You may have to come once or twice to the court and talk about the situation, but by doing so you are providing inspiration to many others who are like, who are stuck up, and who are like actually facing threats in their life, and you can be a huge inspiration to many. So that's one thing that can bring a change. And we also need to see more women standing up and talking about these issues, because even in domestic violence cases, even if you have just filed, it's a great victory, because that's when the husband or the partner knows that she's not going to tolerate this anymore, and I need to stop. And then things really stops. So that itself is a great victory, to even file a case. Even if you've done that much, I think it's great from the survivor side, because that much you've gone through. And then the rest, of course, you will need support. It's important to take support, and it's okay to take support. All of us will need support. All of us will go through something or the other, and we need support, and that's why we have a system in place. So ensure you have that support, and I'm sure you will be able to come out of it. Many of our survivors feel better after filing the case. They are like, okay, at the end of the day, we also were able to do something out of it. And so yeah, it will help.
Thank you, Ruth. I think a lot of times for a domestic violence victim, that step of making that decision and saying, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore, of filing the case or moving out, they're, like you said, the biggest victories, because you're disassociating yourself with your abuser. Moving on, I did want to say the next question I did want to ask is uh, what is the alternative for domestic violence victims who are not receiving help from the police? Like they decide, okay, this legal course, I don't want to file a protection petition or an FIR or whatever else, where they can get that little bit of support from the police to keep the abuser away from them. What would help look like for them? Is there help for them, those that don't want to file a case with the police?
Yes, so there are different ways to look about it. Like one is to file domestic violence case or use a lawyer to file it under Domestic Violence Act. But even the Domestic Violence Act very clearly says that you can file other petitions too, and they are encouraging survivors to file other petitions too. So if you think you don't want to go through Domestic Violence Act, you can utilize the Family Courts Act as well, wherein you can ask for divorce or you can ask for maintenance, things like that. So there are different options available. The best thing you can do is talk to the lawyer and see what are the options available for you. Now, if you only want compensation or an alimony or maintenance, there are separate petitions that you can file under it. In many of the cases, many of the women don't want to file domestic violence or don't want to file even a maintenance alimony. The only thing they want is a divorce. Like, as long as I get my divorce, I'm fine. I don't want to deal with it. The lawyers will be ready to file such cases as well. So it will depend on what exactly you want. And then obviously the lawyers can advise you and tell you what are the ways and strategies in which they can, file those cases and what best solution can you get. But at the end of the day, it's the survivor's decision of what they want. And once they've made the decisions, then definitely the lawyers can file it in the ways that she is asked for.
That's very useful, that there are options based on what you want, because sometimes they may not want to deal with the whole chaos
Yes.
of dragging their husband or partner through the whole legal process and may just want that divorce.
Yeah.
um,
And even under domestic violence, as I've already stated, it's not a court system where they just take evidence and just listen to one side, and it's more like a criminal court where you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. The courts are more flexible. They allow counseling on both sides. They allow mediation. So if both the parties want to talk it out, talk it in a mediation, come to a settlement, they allow that. They allow periods. So you just have to tell the court that we want to settle this matter and we are ready to do it through mediation, then that option is also available. Now, again, if it's not working out, the mediation settlement agreement or the settlement conditions that's laid out is not working out for you both, you can still come back to the court and fight the matter again. So there are many options available under the Domestic Violence Act as well. So that's why this is very different, because they believe family is an institution and to give the best shot possible for the family. That's how the court's also saying it. And so there are ample of opportunities available. It's the decision of both the parties at the end of the day.
Right. That's so helpful. Um, Although I think the biggest issue in our Indian context is that a lot of times there is more advocacy sort of for a family unit to stay together, which then hinders the woman to take a step to be bold and say, no, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. But I think there are so many resources available now, both in terms of legal resources, non-governmental organizations, pro bono lawyers, counselors, social workers that are just ready to provide the help, I think.
True.
The one thing off of all of what we're discussing, I wanted to ask is, I know marital rape is a big issue in an world over, but in most countries it's criminalized. From my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know marital rape is not criminalized in India. What would you do if a woman is subject to rape within marriage? Uh, which again, I wonder if it comes under sexual abuse, under domestic violence. What can she do in this situation?
Yes, true, Anusha. That's the sad reality in India. Marital rape is still not criminalized, and there's a lot of activism going on around the subject. And we are hoping there's an amendment happening under our section of rape in the Criminal Procedure Code and in the Indian Penal Code. But as such, we do not have criminalization of rape. And so, though sexual abuse is written under Domestic Violence Act, and obviously marital rape would come under the definition of sexual abuse under Domestic Violence Act, the punishment is something that I think the magistrate court will not even have the power. The maximum the magistrate under domestic violence can do is to provide protection orders for the victim or for, the survivor, but they cannot have a harsh punishment of, having 7 or 8 years in jail, which is like the minimum punishment for rape in India. And that is usually covered under the Indian Penal Code. But that is also a situation where technical issues, wherein actually only a sessions judge, that is a higher judge from the magistrate court, who can actually take up such matters. And therefore the magistrate is not able to, like, he or she doesn't have the power to actually convict them and call it marital rape, though it's called sexual abuse under the Domestic Violence Act. So it's a technicality. The maximum that the magistrate can do is provide protection, provide compensation, and provide medical help and things like that, but not as much to the punishment that is laid out under Section 375.
I think that's very unfortunate, and there's been a lot of debate, I think, recently in this aspect, and hopefully there will be an amendment that can help. But for a woman in this situation, would you just say she can still file for divorce? Because there is, I'm going to assume, and maybe it's a brash assumption, but I think the progression of abuse usually starts from psychological, physical, and then progresses to sexual. So on the basis of psychological and physical abuse, she can still file under domestic violence and still file for divorce, and all of that would still be.
Yeah, all of that, especially under Divorce Act, she will definitely get her divorce. It's only that when it comes to the whole punishment and about it equalizing with the rape that we have under Section 375 of the Indian Penal Code, that's something that's still talked about, and that's still seen as not being criminalized because it's seen as an exception. Sadly, that's written out very clearly that it's not applicable for married women, which means marital rape is not considered. And it's a sad thing, which we hope to change, which we hope to see a change in the near future, because there's a lot of debate, there are a lot of High Court petitions that's coming up and Supreme Court petitions that's coming up to change this aspect. And so we are hoping that will change soon.
Absolutely. I think all of us hang on to hope for changes with our legal system and criminalizing things that need to be criminalized, and that the government recognizes certain issues. Moving on, I think just as we have gone through so many bits, I just wanted to touch on the aspect of what do forms of relief for a domestic violence victim look like? What does relief look like, and what do forms of relief, access to that relief, what does that look like for a domestic violence victim?
Yeah, there are many reliefs that they can sort out for, and there are many orders the magistrate can do. Like I've always stated, the first thing is protection order, which also includes shared household, which means in many of the Indian homes, the thing is, most of the time, the victim or the survivor is staying with the husband's family and the husband. That's called the marital home. And when she is kicked out or when she's filed a case, she needs to get back to the same household, and they are not ready to accept. So based on the orders, she actually gets to stay back. So with this order, nobody can ask her to come out. She cannot be evicted. She cannot be asked to evacuate the house. She can still be back home. That is if she need it. Now, if she doesn't want a shared household, but she needs a separate accommodation and she needs the same status in which she was staying earlier, then such accommodation orders can also be provided. So based on what the survivor wants, in such ways the judge will make the decision, and also based on facts and circumstance of each case. But these are some of the protection orders that's provided under the residence part. Then apart from that, there are also, proper protection orders, general orders stating that husband cannot, do any kind of violence against perform any kind of violence against the wife. And that includes any threats or abuse or anything, the entire domestic violence that's defined. They've asked them not to, not even to attempt to commit such offense. And if that's so, then definitely there'll be a penalty and he will have punishment as well. Those are general orders. And then you also have, monetary relief, like basically if there's a lot of trauma involved, and there's a lot of torture that the survivor has gone through, many of the times there's a monetary compensation that is sought for. In most cases you can ask it at any stages of the case. So in most cases, most of the survivors will ask from the beginning itself. And even if you're not able to take care of the expenses in the court, then those can be also sought for, and the judges can make interim orders. So any kind of compensation right from the beginning till the end, the magistrate can look into the facts, decide, weigh the merits of the case, and then decide. And then obviously if children are involved, custody orders can be made. And definitely if at all these orders are provided and the respondent, that is the husband or the partner, do not comply with such orders, then that's called a breach. And definitely there's a higher penalty for the breach. Sometimes it's a penalty, and sometimes it can be a punishment of imprisonment in jail. So both of it is applicable, and it depends on the discretion of the judge. So they try to, so that's only when you have breached on the compliance orders.
That's very useful. I think a lot of times putting them behind bars is definitely what a victim wants. But I think knowing that through filing petitions, through understanding that if they do breach, there are higher levels of punishment at each level, I think can offer comfort to someone who's fighting a very long battle and going down this journey.
Sure.
The last question I did want to ask, based off all of what we're discussing, is there scope for mediation in any of the cases of domestic violence? Again, would you recommend mediation, especially because it's not just a divorce case, but there is violence involved? Just want to understand what your take on this is before we wrap up.
Yeah, so like I've already stated, mediation is an option that's provided because it also requires for both parties to come together and talk about it. In many cases, what we also see is there's a lot of opinions and lot of stories that both want to share, and that's not happening in court. What happens in court is basically two lawyers fighting, and the way we see the matter is very different from what a husband and a wife sees. And so there are also times when survivors said that but I haven't heard from him, or I want to. So many of the times these settlement or these mediation grounds are for both of them to voice their opinion, and that's when most of the lawyers do not interfere and have them come to a decision. And the good part of it is, especially when children are involved, there's a speedy disposal. Otherwise it can take forever. So there's speedy disposal. And also in many cases what we see is sometimes not in all cases, there are cases where we have there are cases where we have seen the accused not wanting to accept any of it, but there are also cases wherein we have seen the accused have accepted it and ready to compensate the other side. So I feel that in such cases it's a win-win situation at the end of the day. I'm sure the victim also would want compensation rather than asking staying completely away, or she would want a divorce, and that's her major issue there. In many of the cases what happens is she wants a divorce, the husband is not ready to give divorce, and so she files a domestic violence. So there are different facts and circumstance of each case. So I cannot completely say that mediation is good in all cases, but most of the cases that we see, especially if the case is going for a number of years and it's just about two lawyers fighting their egos, I would say give an opportunity to them and let them decide what they want. In some cases it works, many of them settle like that. In some cases it does not work, also, and that's when we get back to court. So I do agree that that mediation is a welcome step, because that's how at least both sides can listen and figure out and come to some conclusion. Otherwise it's harder when lawyers and others are involved. The whole battleground is different then. So yes.
That's very useful. I think a lot of times when people think of mediation, they would think that it's just you're trying to sort of find a level ground. But in some ways, I think it can also give the victim closure in understanding what actually went down without just, as you
Yeah.
said,
So
lawyers arguing.
yeah, and like many of them think it's like a very out of court settlement. It's just two lawyers talking and coming up with an agreement. It's not like that. Actually, there are mediators who are appointed by the courts. These are mediators who have been appointed by courts based on trainings that they have gone through, and they only facilitate discussions. They ensure that lawyers do not intrude. So they start up from the initial issues. They talk to each other. They ask both of them what are the issues. Both of them can listen to each other, and then they have private conversations with both, and then they come back and ask what are the solutions. Even the solutions are deliberated, and they try as much as possible to ensure lawyers are not involved. In some cases and in some circumstances, they even ask lawyers to just take a back seat and not even be in the room, so that the individuals can come to a decision. So I feel it's not like how we say it's an out of court settlement. It's more to do with listening to each other and accepting what went wrong and what went right and what can be done right. And I feel it is always in most of our cases we've seen positive results coming out of it. So hopefully I'm hoping, especially when it comes to divorce matters, this really works.
Right. That's very useful. I think um, it's just I wanted to understand it a little bit more so that, if a domestic violence victim is watching it, they are well aware of what choices they have, and they can choose to look their accuser in the face or not at all, and just be done with it based on, again, what they've gone through.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for spending time with us, talking us through just right from what does domestic violence mean to what can a victim do, what can they access, what does relief look like. It's just been such a great informative session, and I know anyone who watches this will greatly benefit from it, as there's such few resources available and very few lawyers who would step up like you and just walk someone through a process that someone who is just a layman and not from a legal background can understand. So thank you so much, Ruth. I really appreciate you giving us this time.
Thank you, Anusha. Thank you for your patient listening.
Not at all. It's a joy, and I can't wait to see how many people this is going to benefit. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ruth. Bye.
Bye.